This is a video story of my first bout with cancer, which kind of technically wasn't really my first bout of cancer because I've had little spots on my skin that I had to have removed, and I've also had different kinds of cysts. And I have pilar cysts on my head, and I had a big cyst on my arm that was removed, which the doctor really didn't test or identify or care what it was. I just wanted rid of it. So, anyways, this chapter starts with 2015. I am now in our house on Cox Avenue with Robert and with Grandpa Botterbush. Phil was with us. So the three of us are living together. Sometimes there's trying times because Grandpa's kind of grumpy, but he has his own room and he has a place of a screened-in porch where he can go out and smoke. So things are rolling along, and I'm also at this point in time working at FedEx, and my driving was out of Kernersville. So I drove up to Kernersville and leave my car there, and sometimes I would leave my car there for a night or two and then you take the truck home, or sometimes I would go back to Kernersville, leave the truck, and then take the car home, and then the next morning take the car up. So depending on what was happening and if I needed the car, and depending on if I had things to return, I would or would not keep the truck for a whole week at a time, sometimes just a day or so at a time. So I'm happily working at FedEx, but then I feel this solid thing in my belly, so I could lay in bed and it would feel like up near where my liver was that there was something hard. So I did go to the doctor and I said, it seems like there's something wrong here. Feels like a weird thing. So the doctor came in and felt it and said, no, that shouldn't be there. We need to take a CT scan and see what that is. So the nurse was very nice, and she told me that she was going to send me directly from that office where I was. I can't remember what town it was, somewhere around Winston-Salem. It wasn't in Thomasville exactly, the town we were living. And then I headed off. So I did call my sister and said they found something inside me and I need to go get a CT scan. So I did have to drink some stuff, and they said just go wait for, I don't know, a half hour, 45 minutes, and then go in and get the CT scan. I think how that all went is I went for the scan first, and you got the drink, and then you waited, and then you went back. So I'm in the parking lot calling Roseanne, telling her I'm going to get a scan, that we don't know what it is. And that was July of 2015. So anyways, after sitting in the parking lot, I go back to the radiation place, radiology, where they're going to do the scan and drink another something and then get the scan done. So the scan is done, and when the report comes in the next day, the doctor calls and says, yes, you have a tumor. We need to send you to the Winston-Salem Cancer Center. So there's a cancer center at Wake Forest Hospital in Winston-Salem. So I get an appointment with the doctor there, and I meet with the doctor. And right now I can't even think of his name, but we did not hit it off. And he said, yes, you have a rather large tumor there, it's going to start pressing on your other organs. So that should be tested and removed. So he talked about, he found a really nice intern in his office because it's a rather big center and there's a lot of people in there, and most of it is women sitting around with breast cancer. So I was the only one, and as time went on, it grew. So I looked more and more pregnant because it started coming out and showing this rather large tumor. So in the end, after it was removed and weighed, it turned out to be 7.5 pounds, which is a heck of a tumor, so no wonder I looked pregnant. At this point, I'm 62 years old and going to the cancer center on a regular basis for them to set up the time to remove this tumor. So the interview with the doctor was him saying, yes, we'll go in there and we'll take that out and see what it is. And then in a very blasé way, he says, while we're in there, we might as well just do a whole hysterectomy. And I said, no. I said, I'm only here to have the tumor removed and for you to look at it and see what the problem is. I don't want any extra surgeries. So that was the wrong foot to get off because I'm not doing what the doctor says. And then he says, let's go ahead and schedule you for surgery in August. You can set that up with my office. And I said, I can't do that in August. In August, it is my 30th wedding anniversary. And I have to go on a trip. I think I have that wrong because it's our 40th wedding anniversary. So it's our 40th wedding anniversary. We already have our flights, we already have our plans, and we're going to Pagosa Springs for our 40th wedding anniversary. And I have plans. It's going to be a big party. It's a 40th wedding anniversary destination party. And Isabel and Heather are coming from Florida, and Adam and Stephanie and the two kids they had at that point in time were coming from California. Karina was coming from North Carolina. She hadn't met Wes yet. And Robert and I are coming from North Carolina. And Judy and Bill Nace are coming from Pennsylvania. So all these people have plans to go to Pagosa Springs, and it's the Pagosa Springs resort through RCI timeshare, and we have 3 rooms. So no way was that going to stop or be changed. So I said, no, you'll have to wait till we get back from our trip. And that was a good thing, and it was a thing that didn't happen on the second bout of cancer, because the good thing about that, I had time to think, I had time to get myself as healthy as possible, I had time to ponder what I wanted done and make some decisions about my own health. In the meantime, the whole thing about it was I felt fine. I felt my belly getting bigger and I looked like I was pregnant, but I had no major pain and I was just perfectly fine. So since I didn't have any major pain and everything was okay, we went and did our trip and had a fabulous, fabulous trip. At Pagosa Springs and did some hiking and went up the mountain, drove around. We did a cookout thing, and we rode the train. We took the train from Durango up to Silverton. We just had a wonderful, wonderful vacation. So we came back and I had scheduled my surgery with the doctor to be after Labor Day. So I'd have to look up the actual date, but we got home from our trip the end of August, and then it was Labor Day Monday, and I think the hospital was Tuesday when I had my surgery, whatever that date was, September of 2015. I was a nervous wreck. I've never been in the hospital except as a late teen when I had my wisdom teeth out. And I was never taking any kind of pharmaceuticals or anything. And it was just a very scary time for me. So we sat in the waiting room for a long time with the pastor from the church at Rosemont and Robert and me, waiting till they called me back to the pre-op. So the minister left, and Robert and I are in the pre-op, and they're taking my blood pressure every half hour or so while I'm waiting. So I don't know if it was delayed because they didn't have the operating room ready, or I didn't know if it was delayed because they were waiting for my blood pressure to go down because I was very nervous. So my blood pressure was very high, and then it kept going down as I was relaxed more and resigned to the fact that I was going to have this major surgery. So I had the major surgery. I had a 9-inch incision, 4.5 inches below my belly button and 4.5 inches above my belly button, and they cut right through my belly button, and they removed the tumor. And prior to the surgery, when we got back from our trip, my pre-op meeting with the doctor was to sign the consent form. Well, signing the consent form took 2.5 hours because I'm sitting in there reading what I'm signing. And it's really terrible stuff. It says we'll do whatever we want to do, whatever we find, we'll go ahead and do that while you're under the anesthesia and while you're cut open. And I told him no way would they do the hysterectomy that he inkled to, saying that they would do that when I first met him. I said, I don't want anything else taken out. I said, I only want you to take out the tumor. If anything's twisted or covered by the tumor, that's a possibility, but I said, you just don't take out any other body part that's in there. I wanted my ovaries, I wanted everything to be normal. I didn't want any changes. And then I would cry, and then he would say, I can't change this. And then I would say, well, I'm not signing it. And then he says, well, we'll have to cancel your surgery. And I said, no, I want to have the surgery. I want this tumor removed. So we went back and forth, and he would leave the office and then come back and say, have you changed your mind? And I go, no, I haven't changed my mind, and I'm busy trying to think of how to tell him, take what you need, but that's it. And then I was telling him I didn't want him to cut the tumor. I wanted it to be intact. I didn't want any cancer cells disturbed because that happens. So eventually we came up with a extra sentence that we wrote on the thing saying that he would take out the tumor intact, and the goal was only to take that out and not touch any other organs. So that was a trauma thing even before the surgery, but as I said, now we're waiting to get into the surgery. Not sure if they're that delayed or that backed up, or they're just waiting for my blood pressure. So I say goodbye to Robert and have the surgery. They tell me the tumor they took out was 7.5 pounds. It was going to go for testing, which I didn't really understand that when they told me that. And didn't know why they needed testing, because the other thing that I told the doctor from the very beginning is I wouldn't, no matter what happened, I would not do any chemo or radiation. I don't believe in doing that, that I believe in having your body help itself and heal itself. And I wasn't going to do that, so it didn't really matter what they decided they wanted to do with the tumor. But I had no idea what they were thinking that they would do with the tumor. So anyways, I'm in the hospital for a while, and the hospital stay was okay. And Robert would try and come and visit me and drive from work to Winston-Salem, where the hospital was at Wake Forest Cancer Center, to come see me. I really don't think I had any other visitors in the hospital, and then we went home to 405 Cox Avenue in Thomasville. And then Roseanne came. She flew and she stayed with me while I was recuperating. And the final surgical report said it was a 7.5-pound tumor, but it was written in millimeters and centimeters and in other language, but I converted it to 7.5 pounds in my mind. As big as a baby. I'd already had 10-pound babies, so my body was used to having interference in the organs. And they took out the tumor. They took out my right ovary, and they took out my right fallopian tube. Other than that, they left everything intact, which was good and made me happy, and they didn't have any other complications. So Roseanne's there, Robert's going to work, and I'm recuperating. And in the meantime, Grandpa Botterbush went back to Pennsylvania because he didn't want to stay with us, and I'm not exactly sure how that decision happened at this point in time, but that was when he moved back to his house where he was living that Betty owned back in York, Pennsylvania on Meadowbrook area. So I'm doing better, and I actually even go back to work for FedEx and put on light duty, and I had somebody come and help. So I did a lot of the driving, and gosh, can't think of him. I can picture him, but can't picture his name. Rode along with me and did the running for a while, and then I just went back to work. So Robert's working at Thomas Built Buses, and he has good insurance. And then several weeks after my surgery, we get a check in the mail from this company that I don't know what it is for $25,000 and some change. And it's like, oh my gosh, what is this? And it's payable to Robert Botterbush. Turns out we didn't know what it was, so he goes into his HR people and say, what is this? And they weren't really sure. They were going to check into it, and we had no idea. And the hospital bill for the surgery was around $25,000. So I'm saying, did they not pay the hospital for the surgery and the operation and the stay in the hospital? What's going on here? So finally, they said that check is not for you. The check's payable to you, but that's for the lab work on your tumor. So that needs to be sent to such and such a lab to cover the cost of the analysis of your tumor. Which blows my mind to even think about this, is that's $25,000, which is about the same amount for a surgery and a hospital stay of major abdominal surgery, and that's another $25,000 just for analysis of the tumor. And I'm going, why did they even do that? Because I don't know, if they want to do that for their own science experiments, they should take care of that themselves. I shouldn't be paying it. And actually, I'm not the only one paying it. Every one of you who's listening to this who has insurance and is part of the system, we all put money in the pot for all this medical stuff. So anyways, we mailed it off to the company and that cleared that bill. And then I had my follow-up, my second follow-up with the doctor after all this is happening, and I said, we got the check to pay for the analysis of the tumor. I said, it was $25,000. I said, that's ridiculous. And the doctor said, well, did your insurance pay it? And I said, it's $25,000. And he said, well, if your insurance didn't pay it, I could help you out with that, or that the hospital would help with that. And I'm going, no, I wish they would, but the insurance already sent us a check for $25,000, which we've forwarded to the lab place, that there's no reason at this point for you to pay it, but there's no reason that you did that analysis, because I told you the first day I ever met you that I would never do chemo or radiation for this tumor. And he says, well, we did it anyways because you might change your mind. Well, he certainly didn't know me, because no way was I changing my mind. So in the meantime, prior to going back to work, I did, when Roseanne was ready to go home, she took me back to Pennsylvania, and I had stayed at the B&B for a while recuperating, and that's when Audrey and Angela and Susan all came up to the B&B at Shawnee while I was recuperating in Pennsylvania, and I actually did some little walking hikes. So after the surgery, I did a lot of self-care things and a lot of research, and did a lot of things to take for anti-cancer. So that's when I was introduced to beta-glucan and started taking that, taking walks, doing exercises, and actually from that time forward, I ended up with a list of 81 things to do to be healthy, which included things like being outside and sunshine and skin brushing and oil pulling and eating properly and no sugar and no gluten and all kinds of stuff, because I'd already been a health nut, because back in 2012, before we even moved to North Carolina, Robert and I had cured our diabetes, which is another chapter, which would be dated 2012. So I did everything I could do. So when I tell people I didn't want to do chemo or radiation after the surgery, that I only was doing the surgery to get rid of the tumor, at that point in time, that didn't mean that I wasn't doing anything. It meant that I was doing everything else under the world that I could read and study about. And that's when I learned about, oh goodness, Chris beat cancer. Oh my gosh, there's so many natural doctors and functional medicine people that you can spend days and days reading all the information of things you can do to combat cancer. So that was the surgery in September of 2015. Back to work, worked a little bit over the Christmas holiday, and life went on. Life went on at this point, so this part of the story has to continue, because I passed the 5-year mark. I thought, wow, I'm doing so great. And it was 8 years later that I get my second bout of cancer. So that's the story from 2022 and 23, which is another chapter. But in the meantime, the surgery was in September, and in February I get a email from Karina saying she found this women's only sprint size triathlon in South Carolina. Did I want to do it with her? Well, I never even was an athlete of any sort, and she had completed a triathlon that I had told her about for her first one in Tennessee at Warriors Path State Park in Tennessee. I think that was Tennessee. I'm pretty sure that's not North Carolina. Anyways, Dad and I had supported that on her first triathlon. So she's asking me to do a triathlon when I'm 63 years old. I just had surgery like in September, so this is February. What is that? September, October, November, December, January, February, 5 months earlier. And that November of 2015 is when my bike was stolen out of our shed. So it turns out the neighbor was dishonest and broke into our shed and took Christmas stuff and took our bikes and took anything or everything he could find. So we got insurance on that because a lot of Robert's tools and things were there because we didn't keep a whole lot of stuff in the basement. We kept all our good stuff in the shed, which was stolen. So I had no bike. I hadn't been swimming, although I did join the Y for stretch classes and the things that I could do after the surgery. And I hate to run, although I do like to walk and hike. So I told her, honey, I don't think I could do this triathlon. I haven't been swimming laps in the pool for years. My bike was stolen, and I hate to run. And her reply was very simple: those are excuses. So needless to say, when your daughter says you're making excuses for not taking on a challenge, and I've always encouraged my kids to do things and take on a challenge and have good capability. So we signed up. And in July of that year, of 2016, I completed my first You Go Girl women's only triathlon. And when they announced the winners, I had second place in my age group because the age group of those women 60 to 65 was very small. I'm not sure how many were in it, but I was second place. Needless to say, I won my t-shirt. I got a bottle of wine as an award, and I was hooked. So that was the beginning of my triathlon career. Became a triathlete, trained and worked out after having a 7.5-pound tumor removed. I was working hard at being as healthy as I could be. So another chapter will be all about those triathlons and how many I did in the 8-year period up until I actually did some in 22. I did a 5K in 22. So things started going downhill in 23, definitely downhill in 24. So that was the end of that triathlon career. But sure, that was quite a run. I loved it. I think that's all for now. This is the ovarian cancer story of 2015 into 16 and the beginning of my triathlon career. So the next chapter after this is going to be doing my triathlons. I did them while I was still working for FedEx, so I was very strong and I could run and I could move well and I was very strong. And started getting lean still a little thick in the center and the belly from the surgery. I called my little bulge there, I called that my cancer surgery bulge, but otherwise I was in pretty good shape. And that was from 2016 until 2022. Signing off for now. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.